This is module 5, data, sources of data, types of data, and data collection methods will be discussed here. Please subscribe to this presentation and also share it. Press the bell like button that is by the side of subscribe, and so that you can receive other presentations from us. Thank you. Now let's go to data sources, types and methods of collection. Research data. Research data have factual materials. They are commonly recorded. They are materials of fact, commonly recorded, retained by the collector in an acceptable form to the scientific community, so that it can support your research findings. In other words, your research findings must be evidence-based, and to get the evidence, you must collect data. These data formats can be in form of interview, which you keep in your interview notebooks or recorded in your interview notebooks. It can take the form of survey responses, in which you count the number of people who responded to a particular question. You can use software. You can take the form of software where you use code measurements from laboratory, or field equipment. You can use equipment as well. You can use images from photographs, films, scans, autoradiograms. It can be in form of audio recordings. It can be physical samples which you take on the field, and so on. Now, data sources, especially for social research. Primary. So when you say primary source, you are talking about field investigation. That is the primary source. You are referring to what you did on the field and how you did it. Now, observation, you can observe from the field. You can interview respondents from the field. You can also use questionnaire schedules, whether self-study, by mail or whatever, which you send to respondents to be able to extract information relating to your research problem. Now, secondly, you can have secondary data, which you call documentary sources. So data can be from two sources, primary and secondary. The primary one you call field investigation. That's where you obtain primary information. The secondary information is obtained from documentary sources, and documentary sources include information obtained from books, which you have to reference, you have to cite, then from published official data, by institutions, corporations, and so on, then survey reports from industries, memoirs of people who have lived in the past or who are still living, travel logs, history for your historical research, people who are there then or who got first-hand information and you are trying to collect second-hand information from them, unpublished documents that are kept somewhere that have not been published. There are so many of them in the Vatican. If you are doing a research relating to religion, there are so many unpublished documents in the Vatican. Just as an example. Yes, you can classify data majorly into qualitative and quantitative. So you have qualitative data and quantitative data. Qualitative data refers to data that are non-numeric data. They are not in numbers, in integers. and you can have two types which are categorical. So if you have categorical data, it is a qualitative data, and data that measures attributes, which are non-metric scoring data. Then you can have your data also can be nominal or ordinal, which is reflecting whether it's reflecting that it is non-numeric. Now, if you look at the schematic on the right side, you will see that qualitative data, as I've explained, consists of nominal data and ordinal data, basically, because both explains categories and attributes, and they are non-numeric. So there are examples here, like nominal data, for example, gender, men, women. Then you also have hair color, brown, blondie, So these are usually categorical. You can categorize your respondents into this group, to each of these groups, and there is no metric measurement involved at all. Ethnicity, maybe African, Asian, American, Hispanic, and so on. And you also have maybe gender, as I said. I think yes, gender, male or female, men or women, different sexes like that. Then you can have ordinal data. Ordinal data really measures attributes. Under types we talked about categorical data and attributive data. Here it talks about attributes. So you have first, second, third. You have letters in grade A, B, C, trying to measure their attributes in a non-metric way. You also have economic status, which can be measured in low, medium, high. These are non-metric data. Then ordinal data you have, both of them will come under qualitative. Then you have quantitative. Quantitative also can be categorized into two. You have discrete data that have numbers in a particular segment. Those are discrete data. Then you also have continuous data. Now for quantitative, let me go back to that again. Quantitative data are usually metric or numeric, if you like. Then the types are continuous and discrete data, as you can see on the schematic on your right. Then scale or data format, interval and ratio. So while interval and ratio applies to quantitative data, nominal and ordinal applies to quantitative data. I'm sure we are still going to come to this as we progress. So we should be very careful. If you say quantitative data, you are referring to data that are measured in interval and ratio scale. And if you say qualitative, you are referring to data measured in either nominal or ordinal scale. If you want to read more about it, a link is already there, and that explains more to you and can expand more on what I have said. But I have provided the basic explanations, which should leave you with no doubt as to what we are trying to pass through, or what we are trying to get across to you. Yeah, for the sake of further explanation, let me try and explain metric, non-metric data and metric data. Non-metric data is data that is ranked, and it has no linear pattern, and that is called non-metric data. Is usually nominal and categorical, or ordinal if you like, because ordinal is categorical also, and you rank it. So non-metric data is usually ranked, and that is ordinal. You can also rank nominal, male and female. You can how many female, how many male, so you can rank them. And they have no linear partnership. The male is not greater than female. If you label male 0 and female 1, does not mean that female is greater than male. Or you make it 1 2, it does not mean that the one that has 2 is higher. There's no linear pattern to it. So what is categorical data, which falls under non-numeric data? This data arises from variables which are divided into groups. You can have examples in race, sex, age, group, and educational level. So you divide them into groups. For example, race, Hispanic, African American, and so on. You just group them like that. Under race, sex, you have male, female. Age, you can have them also in categories. Then group, age group as well. The educational level, you can also categorize them. Then attribute data, which is the second arm of non-metric data that have a quality characteristic that meets or does not meet a product specification. So it's attached to product specification, defective or not defective. It's also categorical somehow, because you count the number of defective and the number of not defective, or the number of those who passed and failed. So it's a form of categorical, but it's measuring attributes this time, whether it's good or bad, whether it can be used or cannot be used. That is the basic difference. But attribute data are also categorical data. Then metric data that is measured in real numbers, usually on the interval and ratio scale, because those are real numbers. So continuous data, the values of observation belonging to it may take any value within a finite or infinite interval which you can count. So if it's something you can count, there is order there and you can measure, then that's a continuous data, and that's a metric data. E.g. height, weight, temperature, amount of sugar in an orange, time required to run a mile, and so on. These are continuous data because you can count, you can order them, and you can also measure. Then discrete data that supports the numerical characteristics of counting. Number of patients in a hospital, for example. This is an example of a discrete data. Number of students in a class. The moment you start counting, say the number of product or number of subjects in a given area, say in a classroom, in a hospital, or in the stadium, that is an example of discrete data. Data that supports the numerical characteristics of counting. If you want to make any sense of that data, you have to count. Research instruments are methods of data collection. When you hear research instruments, they are referring to methods by which you can collect data for research purpose. One, experimentation. You can collect data by experimentation. That means you are trying to control how subjects are assigned to groups and treatment of each group and the treatment of each group, or the treatment that each group receives. So you have to in experimentation there is an element of control usually which you use, and you assign to groups, and you treat each group, and you try to see what impact it has on the groups. but you have one that is controlled so that you can really measure the impact, how effective it is. So, but anyway, we'll come to experimentation later. Research instrument one of the methods of collecting data is experimentation, and I've just explained that. Then the other one, interview. Interview means that you go and talk to your respondents, and the instruments you are holding will be a structured interview. Could be a structured interview, or what we call interview schedule. It could be unstructured. Structured means you have already prepared what you are going to ask and you are not going to deviate. Unstructured means that you have not really documented. You have an idea of what you are going to ask, and it's not arranged. It depends on the response of the respondent that will instigate further questioning or what you are going to ask. Then you have semi-structured. Semi-structured is a mixture of both. It's a hybrid of the structured and the unstructured. Then for example, now what are the methods that you can use for interview? You can use personal interview, which could be in-depth or focused. You can have a group of people, 8, 9, 5. Five in your tongue. Oh.
Personal interview, in-depth/focus groups, telephone interviews, mail surveys, computer direct interviews, email surveys, internet/intranet, web page, surveys, scanning questionnaires. 3. Questionnaire https://researchmethodology.net/research-methods/survey-methods/questionnaires 2/ Mail questionnaire, self-administered questionnaire. 4. Observation. V. Documents E.G. Literature survey, records survey used as basis for business and economic forecasts.
By way of further explanation, let me forge ahead again. Experimental, I said before that you need to manipulate one variable to determine if changes in that variable cause changes in another variable, which we call control variable. So you have a variable of manipulation and a control variable. So you just use it to determine if the manipulation of that variable causes changes. So it's a cause effect exercise really, and that is the crux of experimental research or experimental instrument when you are collecting data. Then interview, you can use script for conducting your interview. Scripts contain unstructured and structured questions, or both, or a hybrid of both, as I've explained. There's a link there that leads you to further study on interview. Then interviewers must be trained, that must be said. They must be trained to locate, identify and motivate respondents, to clarify concerns, observe quality of responses, and enlist the cooperation and record responses. These are their basic assignments, and you have to train them for that. Otherwise, they will not be able to do the job well. So you must train them properly. Then conducting it, an interviewer must have the opening remarks. You must know how to gain entry in a non-threatening appearance. You must, of course, if you are properly trained, you will be smiling. Introduce yourself and state the purpose, explain the study, ask questions, be informal but be exact, and the questions must be channeled towards your research questions so that you can get answers to them. Then observation, you can use sensory organs like eyes to observe, ears, nose, then you pay attention and perception to collect the data, which must be on purpose. You will get further link to the further link is given there. Then observation can be controlled, uncontrolled observation. It can be controlled or uncontrolled observation. So if it's a controlled observation, then participant and non-participant observation. It means that you have a measure of control on your observation. If it's uncontrolled, it's just open. It's just freelance observation. It's just open. Then you also have participant and non-participant observation. Participant means it becomes part of what is observed. It enters into the midst of the respondents and try to collect as much information as possible without being identified, without being known. Non-participant is that it must be known, it must come to them and observe. Even if it does not come to them, he can observe from a distance. Depending on the exigencies of his work, he can observe from a distance. And if he decides to participate, he must be part of the respondent and take information without being identified. Now I want to pay particular attention to questionnaire and its construction because it's almost always used in social research, And questionnaire is an instrument that consists of a set of questions, designed to gather information or data for analysis. The results of this gathering of questions are to be used to answer your research question or to test the relevant hypothesis that you have put forward. So it has a purpose. The questionnaire has a purpose. The set of questions which you design are usually literature derived questions which have been asked before or related researches, and that must be justified really And the purpose to get information, or the result of which will enable you to answer research questions or to test hypotheses. Now you can have a link to that and read more. The questions in the questionnaire are derived from the aims and objectives of the study. So all your questions that you are going to ask in your questionnaire must be derived from the aims and objectives of the study, and it must relate directly to the research questions and hypothesis of the study. So the question must be research related, must be specific, so that you can get answers to them. And at the same time, if you are going by way of hypothesis, you'll be able to formulate your answer. I mean, how do I put it now? You should be able to, that will be able to give a clear statement as to what is acceptable and what is not acceptable in your hypothesis testing. Now, parts of the questionnaire will be, first part will be demography of respondents, their age, their places of work, all information that are relevant to the respondent, to show that the respondents have the capacity and credibility to answer your questions, and that they are sufficiently knowledgeable to provide reasonable answers to your question. Then administrative information you also have to provide. Then the data on the relevant variables, which you have also got from the literature. So your questions will be fashioned along these three heads. You can also read more on the link provided. Then pre-questionnaire construction. You must obtain your variables of study and constructs from the literature review. I have said that before. What you are going to query, question, must have been done before, and you can get their constructs and their sub-variables from the literature. So for example, if you are going to ask questions on satisfaction, you know that there are certain sub-variables. Satisfaction as a construct must have some sub-variables under, which together will make up what is called satisfaction as a construct. So it is from this that you draw up your questions. It must be related to your construct. So you define the construct and variables, which you get from literature. And post-questionnaire construction. Well, after you have done your construction of it, you must administer it. You must analyze the response. You also observe the response rate. If there are outliers, you weed them away, and missing values too, you treat them appropriately. The basic thing I want you to understand here is that the construction of the questionnaire derives from your research problem. So if you look at the diagram you have to your right, you see that your research problem and the research title are very closely related. So it is from your problem that you derive your title. So your title must address your problem. Then you go to C. Your aim will also be your title, closely related to your title and the focus of your study. Then D, your objectives and research questions must also relate to your aim and focus. Then E also will be the sub questions, because you first ask the major question, then you have sub questions under that which relate to the major question. Then altogether those sub questions now make up your questionnaire. So you can see that they are all closely tied together. They are closely related. You can't just bring a question from nowhere. In any case, this will still be subject to content analysis, or what we call reliability analysis, to make sure that you have asked the right questions and these respondents will understand the question you are asking. So it is very important when you are drawing up your questionnaire that you start from the research problem, and then your title also is related to research problem. So you search literature and see what your objective should be and your research question should be. That literature gives you an idea, not the exact objectives, but gives you an idea what your objective should be. And your research questions must also be related to your objective. So if your objective is to determine the height of something, the question should be asking what is the height. It's coming by way of question. That's research question. What is the height? So your objective is to determine the height of a building. Then your research question relating to that objective will be what is the height of that building. So you are trying to find out something to determine, and this one is asking what is the height. Once you get the height, you have determined the height of the building. So this is how I want you to see it. Then when you have the major problems there, the major question there, you have sub question. How do you measure it? How do you measure the height? How do you go about it? That's a sub question under what is the height. So all the sub questions will lead you to the main question. So you can read more on this. It's not a difficult thing, but very important that you understand it.